Well, welcome everybody. I'm very glad to be here from Heidelberg in Germany, and I thank the organizers and Diana Kopseva in particular for making all the arrangements. I think it's a really great forum of regional relevance and international discourse. So I have brought a presentation to guide you through something that's not really comparable to the issues that you have here on the agenda, but I think it really touches a lot of the topics that you are discussing. I'm bringing the perspective of a government agency, local government agency with a long tradition in Germany, which I want to introduce you in the beginning. So I will start explaining to you what an international building exhibition is, then I will give you an introduction to Heidelberg, the case of Heidelberg, then go to some references and discourses, and then go into detail what the IBA does in Heidelberg, and then end with an example of how we envision the city of the future in the knowledge-based society. So I'm starting with what is an IBA. It's a discourse that you can read further on this homepage located here. The federal government does not certify IBAs, but it does watch over them in kind of a moral institution. And they also made the effort to put it all in English up here because the format actually is getting more international relevance, as we have now an IBA in the Netherlands and in Austria also. But it's actually a format originating in Germany a long time ago. Maybe you could even call the first IBA the triple Helix model, because it was a duke in the southern state of Hessen which thought he should bring together people from the industry, from the arts, from architecture, and the local government, of course, to produce an exhibition space where arts and crafts basically came together, and there was an effort in industrialization to address what the spatial answers could be to industrialization. Then a couple of years later in Stuttgart, the Werkbund, a German institution, also joined the effort by art and industry. AEG, for example, was one of them. They made an exhibition on housing, how the international style, how new fabrications and building materials could change the supply of housing in Germany. And then the next IBA officially was the one in West Berlin, but actually it was challenged by the East Berlin example of what was formerly known as Stalinallee, an effort for palaces for the people in East Berlin. And the West answered with a modernist district with housing from international architects. And both projects, of course, were long-term and made a big impact of both West and East Berlin. And then in Berlin West, again in the 80s, was also again a 10-year period where the government tried to have different answers to the slum clearance policy that was in place in the 70s in Germany as all over the world, and tried critical reconstruction, as it was called. And there came out new buildings, innovative buildings in the context of the fabric of the city, but also the first time citizen participation was part of an IBA, where even squatters were included. And then the largest in scale was the Lieber-Emscher Park in the Ruhr region, where a lot of deindustrialized areas were connected with landscape parks and innovative zones for businesses also. And then the last bigger IBA was in Hamburg 2013, where an island in the river Elbe was converted to an integrated district of the town. So it all comes down to a long-term project, where it's something that Juan Rogers today called boundary institution. We are an institution which is an intermediate actor between government, university, real estate, and other actors in the city development. And for this, the federal government has certain guidelines, and just a few of them. Of course, it has to be international because that's what the I stands for. It has to build in the end. So in 2022, there will be a real one-to-one scale exhibition in Heidelberg, where you can see what the output of 10 years of discourse and research was. And so for that, we need a set of experiments. We are especially not part of the administration, but outside to really challenge the ways we think about spatial and research development. And so in the end, it's a real-world laboratory, you can say, which is something that's also kind of getting more knowledge in the science community in Germany, how to connect the issues that are research in university with reality outside in the cities. So we are basically working on the knowledge-based society and its implications for urbanism and architecture, And in this, of course, the universities play an important role. And we hope that the knowledge-based society will change our cities in a more positive way than the Industrial Revolution did. As you might remember, the car-friendly city, for example, as you can see it here, was one of the results of the industrialization. And we hope that the knowledge-based society will transform our cities in a different and more humane way. So, coming to Heidelberg, why is Heidelberg a small city? It's smaller than Tomsk, I think, is picking up this IBA. The whole region is larger, it's 2 million, but anyway. The first German-speaking universities were in Prague and Vienna, but in nowadays Germany, Heidelberg actually hosts the oldest university in the German territory as of now. And already in the 16th century, Heidelberg University was an international hotspot. And of course, that's something that also the International Building Exhibition can build upon. And that's something where we also benefit from a lot of attention that we get through the academic network that we have. Now we are based here in the middle of the Rhine-Neckar region, as it's called. Frankfurt is just about here, Stuttgart is about here, and here Mannheim and Ludwigshafen are also together. They built a powerhouse for Europe. A lot of innovative firms, a lot of universities, research clusters are located here, and that's the breeding ground for our challenge to think what the knowledge-based society has to offer for the urban environment. And just to give you a feeling, Heidelberg is also known for its picturesque location. 40 million tourists come there every year to look at the castle, sometimes just a shuttle from Frankfurt Airport to go to the castle, to the old town, and then leave again. Others stay for international conferences. For example, we have the European Molecular Biology Lab funded by 14 European states on molecular biology. We have a private institution on big data research, the largest cancer center, research center in Germany, and others. And they are all spread out, as you can see already, not like in Tomsk, where they are all on Lennon Avenue. And that also brings us to Heidelberg as a special breeding ground for how academia and everyday life can connect. As a planner, I have to point out a little bit about spatial design. So you have a valley here. Here the Neckar goes into the Rhine Delta. And so that's how the city started here with a castle very close, and the university 630 years ago started in mansions of some wealthy people, and then it became, had its own buildings. Then Bunsen, the physics came and got its own laboratories. And then around 100 years ago, they jumped across the Neckar, and this is a post-war big campus of the University for Natural Science and Health. And then you can see how the different villages were incorporated, and now the yellow spots are the ones where the American Army, which also had its NATO headquarters here until 5 or 6 years ago, is now under development. So it's a linear co-evolution of city and university. You can tell that always the city first had its botanical garden here, then the botanical garden was put there, then the clinic, the hospitals came where the botanical garden was put here, there's on the strip again. So it's always a go along with the flow, but the university also reinvented itself times over and over again. But as an IBA, we not only look at academic institutions, but also about the educational institutions that are for everybody, so the schools and also research and development companies. And you can see that it's a scattered picture that we get, and I will come back to that later when I address what is peculiar about Heidelberg. To bring you to this evolution to Heidelberg once more, that's the old town with the university building of the 18th century, then turn of the 19th, 20th century, and the 20th century here. And it's always the question of how does a big player, which is actually stronger and more international than the city itself, integrate into the city. We have former hospital buildings were transformed for social sciences now, and then this called the Neuenheimer Feld, a world brand for natural and health sciences. And for example, buildings are put up there which focus on the interdisciplinary discourse of mathematics, quantum physics, and biology, just to give you an idea. And then new part of town behind the train station is also now for private research and development companies with a focus on quality of life. And the first conversion site of the military will be now a high-tech park, where also the challenge is how to actually gain or retain identity that is there already with old buildings and still give them a new feeling So that transformation of the past into the future is always an agenda that's addressing, of course, the academic impulse of what infrastructure do you need, what kind of challenges do you have for the academic arrangements that you do, but it's also always about quality of life, because there is full employment almost in Germany, and you have to really offer a lot to win the competition for talents, which is global, of course, today. And so the question of how the knowledge-based society actually connects in and out, and what architecture has to do with it, we always look at international examples, like where a general library was in Seattle a key to revitalize downtown Seattle, or in Barcelona, where the stacking of the kindergarten, local community center, and the library was also a nucleus for a new city redevelopment. So education, not only in terms of academia, but also in everyday life, is a challenge where you can actually bring the discourses of the different worlds together. Or you have something that was discussed yesterday here at the same space, how the education environments change at the school in Denmark, which has 80% of the schooling happening in open spaces like this. Of course, it has to be a good sound insulation, but it really works with a different pedagogy that it is successful. Or in the Netherlands, you have actually a new downtown for the city of Vissingen, where there's a project realized that there's two elementary schools, a Catholic and a Protestant one, 3 kindergartens, 33 elderly homes, a parking garage, a big sports hall inside, and it all is integrated. So the question of integration and inclusion is something that I think addresses not only education but also academia more and more. And in Germany there's now a revival of the village, the learning village, instead of the big educational machines that were like hospitals in the old days. Project in Cologne, where you can see that actually also schools open up to society physically, so to integrate real life in the curriculum. And then this is drawn like something that even a path to school is something where the child might learn as much as it learns in school. And to look at the city from that point of view is something that we try in Heidelberg, where the education, the knowledge aspect is looked at in all different layers of our everyday life, and in academia, of course. And another example which we invited to Heidelberg is the new business school in Vienna, where the business school itself has spectacular architecture for its students, but most importantly, the public space in between is something open, where the business school contributed to the neighborhood, where people can come and play with their kids, also if they're not enrolled, and the quality of life is something where in public space, the society and academia can mingle, and it's also a breeding point for innovation maybe, when you're not locked in your little room, but you actually meet the real world in your break. Or other challenges that we have in Germany, how do actually different institutions learn to share one lab, because it's ridiculous how certain professors want their own lab and the lessons are crazy, and so we need buildings like these ones which are just easily to be changed and still give identity. Or Alexander de Heyer from Delft did a lot of research of what constitutes a campus today. And so it's not only the academic, but really within the war of talents you have to address the residential issue. How do students and faculty live? You have to do the triple helix question with the businesses. Leisure is also something for everyday life. And of course, infrastructure is something that also is the quality of life aspect that's a challenge. And here you can see how she tries to address, you cannot please all. And the question is, if you please one of them too much, then the integration aspects, the innovation aspects of transdisciplinarity can be lost. And so in Heidelberg, we also posed ourselves the questions. The modern movement separated functions and said, oh, let's put the universities outside of the city in campuses which we know all over the world. And then now we, of course, try to reintegrate university. And the question is, how far can you integrate university? And we also had a lot of, some over-ambitions, one must say, to open up certain natural sciences to society in Heidelberg, and said, oh no, that's not so good idea. And so we are basically going back and forth between these modes of integration of academic life and everyday life. And I think in Tomsk actually you have a great opportunity, because you have the separation and integration with then an avenue at hand already. Or we look at Columbia University. They had a big expansion plan for Harlem. The black community was protesting a lot, and so they agreed on doing all ground floors of the university buildings with public amenities. stores, libraries, anything that you can imagine, or even in certain buildings put up the open space, the public space into a building. So the question of what can university contribute to its neighborhood is something that I think also in Europe is not so well developed, and also in the United States is still under debate. But the outreach programs of the American universities, I think, are quite impressive to really bring the people in. And that's also what then, of course, the important triple helix is something that we work a lot with in Heidelberg. Also behind closed doors, we bring together investors with academia, with real estate issues. But we also believe, as it was already mentioned today, that that is not enough, especially if we have a lot of alternative facts, not only in the United States, the discussion of how does science actually relate to its environment. We had in Heidelberg a big March of Science, you might have heard about it, all over the world, where we as academia also need to really address what our work, what our funding does to society. That's why we also believe, and IBA actually always has been, about the quadruple helix, which was mentioned today by the Finnish colleague today. So the question is, how in this triple helix do we actually engage a society? And that's something where I come to now when I present to you what we are doing for real in Heidelberg. We have for different stakeholders, different formats of discourse. We have certain things for kids, some competitions. We have the planning community to be addressed. We have computer games for kids. We have with businesses certain moments, and we have exchange, international exchange of knowledge pearls of small university cities where Tomsk might actually fit in quite well. And here again, the city of Heidelberg, and the dots are, as of 2017, the EBA projects under development, and you can see that it's a scattered motive, and that different themes are addressed, which I want to introduce you to now. This is an area where I want to come in the end, where we have the chance to develop 100 hectares together with the city and academic institutions for a knowledge city of the future. We discussed a lot with our advisory board how to bring down to earth this question of knowledge-based urbanism, because if you work too much bottom-up, then you lose the top-down. So we had a lot of entries and ideas in the beginning from the citizens, and then we lost the academic institutions. So now, after 4 years or 5 years running, we have a good mix of certain aspects. One is, of course, addressing sciences and universities. And there we have, by the European Molecular Biology Lab, for example, the new microscope building, a worldwide unique microscope facility, and here they invest the first time in their history 10% of the space for the public, building a lobby where you have a building exhibition all the time open for schools and for the public. So the question of how can a budget also be directed towards the public interest is an issue here. And then we have a student housing project, actually self-administrated by a student group, where the whole ground floor will also have educational facilities where the students themselves will teach graduates of high school what are the options in university. So we have a link between high school students and university students embedded in a learning environment and a housing environment. We address education as the public schools do it. We have, in Germany, we have a school system which is kind of elitist for the last 6 years, the gymnasium it's called, and there the educational methods are very traditional. And here it's the first time in southern Germany that actually a cluster school system is built there with our advisory, or we have a cultural center who was built, an outreach center basically for the kids, because it's hosted in an old villa where the youth doesn't really want to come, and we facilitate the building of a spectacular architecture which invites the young generation to have intellectual discourses. And networks are defined, one in the digital realm, but also in the physical realm. We work on high-speed bike lanes crossing Heidelberg, connecting certain facilities of science and academia through high-speed bike paths, so to say, or other public spaces on the conversion site, which are designed together with the citizens to have that integration running. Or the urban metabolism, as we call it, it's much more than just an environmental agenda. It's really questioning how actually the energy flows, the water flows, even food flows in the city can be part of the everyday life, how we can reconnect to our energy flows. I heard that Tomsk also is reaching out to their nature around what actually the nature environment of Tomsk can deliver to the business case. And here we have a big hot water storage tank, which is also integrated with the educational facilities on top, 55 meters high, just hot water to balance the up and down of renewable energies. Or we have a landscape science park where agriculture is retained, but also education is overlaid in that field. And last but not least, we have co-production, which is overlaying all these fields. We believe that really much more integration is necessary. So we work a lot in all these projects on the phase 0, as we call it. In Germany, we have been planning phases of planning, and so if you have phase 9, then the building is complete. And the phase 0 says that you actually have to engage very early on with all the stakeholders, with the users, with the investors, with the administration, with the politicians, to really have a stable ground for innovation. Because if you just leave one of the stakeholders the innovation path, then it's going to fail because it's either not happening at all or it will not be sustainable in the long run. And so that's why we are very glad that since 1.5 years now we are working on this 1 hectare site that I pointed out at the beginning. And that's where we said first, okay, we need to be really experimental here. And so we split up in 4 teams, international teams, addressing these 4 issues that I mentioned before: science focus, education focus, metabolism focus, and network focus. And with all these focuses, we said, okay, let's push it really hard to the boundaries, and let's see what the city would look like if we only put on one track this innovation cycle. And we did design thinking workshops with the SAP company, where the citizens were included, experts from academia, experts from businesses were included, and for 1 whole day, we worked together on the briefing of these companies. And then the companies came with first initial ideas, discussed them with experts, with the public, and in the end there was a big presentation, and also the administration gathered in a very unusual way, where also the 40 departments of the city of Heidelberg will now have to work differently to make out of this small American village a city, future knowledge-based city. There used to be 8,000 Americans living here with their families, basically, and this site will be bought by the city of Heidelberg soon from the federal government, retained from the Americans. And then we're doing what? We're not doing this. This is the idea of Winnie Maas from MDRT from the Netherlands, who said, okay, if we want to really do a really cool science park, we have to really stress the branding issue and invite all architects, which are as crazy as he is, to put it on the global map, the Bilbao effect, you can call it. Or we had the opposite, a very humble approach addressing the educational issues, how actually you can retain housing to have low-income housing, how you can divide a certain grain size for the city with different educational focuses to give a neighborhood feeling. And Carlo Ratti from MIT, he was working on the networks, and he basically didn't change any architecture at all in terms of new architecture, but he changed every existing architecture a little bit. In the villas, he made garage labs out of the garages. In the slabs, he did public ground floors. And in between slabs, he did makerspaces. And so in the end, it was more about programming an application which brings people together, which brings disciplines together, about mobility, about housing, about doing makerspaces, and about also everyday life, about leisure. And all this sharing, then he proposed would be a new sharing community. And when he published that book, well, actually people would call it in Heidelberg and say, you want to be part of the sharing community, which is something that's not going to happen, but was inspirational anyway. All the digital layer, which is invisible, how that will change our cities. And the metabolism agenda was focusing on all these things that I mentioned before, infrastructure, water, and people calculated that actually in this, without losing the goal of 10,000 inhabitants and 5,000 workplaces, you could produce 40% fruits and vegetables on the site, so on roofs, in between public spaces, and how that architecture would look then was addressed here. But all these things were basically just inspirations. We wanted to get the people of Heidelberg excited about doing something differently, and the more realistic proposal was then a co-production that Kees Christianse did together with the mentioned teams, and it's now also on HoloLens to really discuss it in detail. And that's renderings that come out of that vision, where you have a certain ring road, a different public space, with a little bit like Central Park Drive. You have the startup village of Colorati proposed and new architectures embedded. And in the end, it's a more conceptual plan, as you might think. Actually, just yesterday, I was not able to be there, but I got the message that the communal parliament voted that we actually have the permission to continue our project here. So my colleague Michael Brown was there to receive that honor that we are continuing this work. And it's basically on certain ideas of retain some green heart idea that the Americans left, to have certain hotspots which arrange around this loop, and to have a really radical new mobility solution. And the most of all important thing is that we want to try to establish, with as little planning as possible, a European lively city. So not to have a district that is homogeneous, but to mix not only function but also typologies in a certain grain size, so that you can go there and feel like it's something that comes from different cultures, from different ages, but still have it a new city that integrates different disciplines. And along the freeway, we will have certain big boxes, institutions of research and development, but also with housing. And here we have mixed housing zones where it's different construction methods, different styles, different agendas of academia or of just housing typologies can be experimented. So it will be kind of an expo that's only starting now and which will not be finished in 2022. And under this lies the whole smart city agenda, which also there we want to think it very much more integrated than many cities do, because of course the technology companies are the drivers of the smart city agenda, and it's quite dangerous to believe then that just the gadgets will change society. And we can learn from examples in Singapore and elsewhere that to invest in technology does not make a smart city. You have to actually invest in the users, in the citizens, and in the integration of all different layers to get a smart city. And so we don't not only look at the one side of digital administration, not only on infrastructure, but also on the advocacy regulatory side. And if you integrate all these issues, you can come to a knowledge-based urbanism, we believe, that is also then benefiting the academic world, because it's a real-world experiment, and it of course benefits the quality of life, and in the end, of course, also the country as a whole, because it is then, again, the triple or quadruple helix, which benefits them all with the tax base that's shared. And then at the end, one more image of Colorati, where it's, I think, very important also for the university cities like Tomsk or Heidelberg to think about their public spaces, their gathering spaces. Today we got a beautiful tour of the botanical garden, the greenhouse. And what would it be if that greenhouse would be 5 times as large? It would be actually a public space for academics and people from Tomsk to meet. Can you imagine that? Or if you think about some renderings that I saw of a spectacular science museum, some architects envisioned for Tomsk, there would be an integration of academia and everyday life. I think those are the opportunities and challenges that we face and that we try to work on in Heidelberg until 2022. And I hope to meet you there in 2022. And I thank you for your attention.
Да, друзья, ваши вопросы, пожалуйста. Желающие?
В России очень любят обсуждать уже последние лет 15 проекты строительства кампусов на новых территориях. Мегапроекты кампусов на окраине. Идет перевод. Все нормально? Русский. Сейчас перевод идет? Все окей. В России последние 10 лет очень любят инициировать или, по крайней мере, обсуждать проекты строительства кампусов университетских в полях, на окраинах, новые комплексы. Вот ваше отношение к выбору исторический центр и эволюционное развитие и новые территории? Или, может быть, что-то объединяющее оба эти подхода?
That's a very good question, because of course also Heidelberg has the trouble that actually this area is also outside of Heidelberg. You can tell that the castle is here, the old town is here. It's not on the map of the Heidelberg citizens, but I think actually we have to overcome the idea that it's done all over the place, also in Heidelberg. The social sciences, humanities stay in the old town, and the natural sciences and medical campuses move out. I think it is plausible because it's how the reality works. And so one really has to look at the cases like in the Netherlands, the studies by Andrea Heyer that I showed. It really doesn't pay off, because if you do the campuses outside, also Munich has that problem, then you have to rearrange so much in the end because people don't want to stay there long, they don't take it as a meeting place. So a lot of outside of the city campuses are now have to invest in housing, in infrastructure, in the quality of life issues to really get life in there, because people found out that actually lively campuses are a breeding point for innovation. Innovation often doesn't come in the laboratory, but it comes in a coffee where you meet someone from a different discipline, and there things connect and innovation happens. So I think you cannot avoid to build outside the city. I think that's a reality. But there you have to really, in terms of real estate measures, to really controlling of the ground and giving certain grounds to certain stakeholders. You have to think about how you actually make a city lively. That's what we are trying to do here, that this area will basically be split up in 13 or 14 or 15 different plots, which each investor will get the mandatory to also on this even plot of 5 hectares or so, you will have to put a little bit housing, and you will have to do some business, and let's see which academic institutions come there. So I think, yes, it will happen as cities grow, they change, but the question is, how do we get out of the trap of segregation of functions? And in Germany we have the problem that be it insurance, be it, the retirement funds which invest in housing, they all are only tuned towards segregation of functions. And it's a big effort to really change that. And the same with academia funding. Big research money from the federal government in Germany, they stop their funding at the footstep of the door. And so they don't invest in the public space. Now I showed the European funded laboratory now has 5% of its budget for public relations, basically. And I think that's something that will have to happen also, that if you go somewhere on the green field, you have to have always this extra budget for liveliness, for whatever you want to call it.
Спасибо. Еще вопросы? Да, сейчас мы подойдем.
Either way, we have 2 people.
Я первая. Проводились ли у вас исследования, если университетский кампус расположен в историческом центре города, либо в районах современной типовой застройки, где выше КПД? Проводили такие исследования?
Sorry, so you have to start from the beginning. I missed the first part.
Повторяю, да? Проводились ли у вас исследования, в каком университетском кампусе выше КПД, если он расположен в историческом центре города, либо в районах современной типовой застройки?
Okay. Everything cool. Yeah, okay. It's also a very good question, because as in the evolution of Heidelberg, you can already tell that in the 19th century, when the physicist Bunsen was invited to teach in Heidelberg, he of course couldn't integrate his laboratories that he needed in the old fabric. And so there already you had bigger sizes buildings, and that exploded basically the old city fabric. And the interrelation is something that is then the next question of, in terms of size, I think really there's no way around of growing a city. But the question is, when you stay, how do you become a good neighbor? And there I think there are a lot of examples, like I showed at Columbia University, how you can put it on an agenda that growing universities or academic institutions always have a debt that they have to pay off to the community around it. And so the benefit is something that is hard to measure, but I think it's a reality where you have the social benefit, the integration benefit. It's just in terms of social integration, you can tell that if you have certain kindergartens where academics, people from academics and people from whatever employment bring both their kids, then you have an integration going on. So it's a question of which spaces and which kind of institutions facilitates that mix. I mean, architecture and urbanism cannot do that alone. They need the institutions to work on it. I don't know, did that answer your question, or was it on a different focus? Okay.
Скажу проще, требуется ли для нестандартных мозгов нестандартная окружающая среда, нетиповая?
I think it's not black and white. I mean, of course, you can be a physicist and sit in your laboratory and get an ingenious idea. But as research shows, and also this space actually is trying to create, there is research that says that if you are taking in and out of your disciplinary thinking, inside and outside of your silos of disciplines, then you have a better chance to really look at yourself and your own doing anew. And so I think that's where the mix of academic life and everyday life is something that's, I don't know the studies that are engaged in this. Therefore, I'm too much someone who's focusing on the output. And but actually, we're working on some research that is happening parallel to the IBA in Heidelberg, where then by 2022 we hope to have also more evidence by the sociologists of what actually happens there.
Спасибо. У нас следующий вопрос.
Здравствуйте. Я отношусь к тем, кто поддерживает открытость и поддерживает идею четвертой части спирали общественной. Но в ходе вашего доклада возник вопрос, какие принципы регулируют в ваших проектах эту открытость и, например, приватность, необходимость концентрироваться в работе, в учебе. Вот какой принцип лежит в этом, и как вы считаете, какие процессы определяют такую высокую ценность открытости?
Well, I think the openness question is something where really integration in our societies, which become more and more heterogeneous, is something when we get societies that are more and more heterogeneous, we need to find spaces where we can accept that and can see it as something positive. I think if you don't take heterogeneity as something positive, then in the globalized world we are lost. I mean, I come from a small town and there's nothing heterogeneous, and they still have to learn over the decades how to deal with a black kid in school or something from Asia or something. So I think it's always this heterogeneity is a balance, and that's the question, the answer to your first question. There is no one-fits-all answer to your question. We learned that in the beginning we postulated very much openness, integration, maybe like the mood of my presentation, but in the end we have the 16, 17 projects now under development, and each one has its own intensity of openness, of integration. So with some projects we're happy when they just do in their outreach something in different spaces with the schools or something. Others we are very happy that they devote a lot of space to that integration aspect. So the answer would be, there is not a single answer. It is very individual with the faculty that is involved, the discipline is involved, what the personalities are about. So, and of course the natural sciences, something dealing with nuclear physics is less open than something that's on educational research. And so with all the different players that we have, we found out that you cannot come with a solution from the outside, but you have to work with the users to find the right percentage of openness and integration.
Спасибо. И у нас есть возможность задать крайний вопрос. Желающий?
Добрый вечер. Известно, что в рейтингах университетских городов, как во французских, например, в европейских, фигурируют на первых местах традиционные университетские города, как ваш родной город Гейдельберг. Но сейчас очень активно развиваются и вступают в конкуренцию новые азиатские города. Вот как вам кажется, что предпочтительнее в качестве пространства? Традиционное университетское пространство с многовековой репутацией, такой, или новое, современное, динамичное, то есть как вам больше нравится?
Yeah, very good question, because actually I moved to Heidelberg 4 years ago, and I was actually astonished by the arrogance, to say it bluntly, that those old university towns carry in front of them. And so I think that as an outsider I must also question that arrogance, and I feel that they are catching it, that they need to compete on the real world market of education, of research, of everything. And it's something there where our rector, when we came into his office the first day, he said, "Oh, we don't need you, you know." But it took us 3 or 4 years, and then now he thinks, okay, we can be useful for him, because if you look at quality of life aspects, where the town and gown, as it's said, called the university city conversations, they are so bad in some cities where they just ignore each other, and that also in the end falls back to the university, because they cannot hire the best people that they want. And so there is a trap for the historics, the universities, that they are too arrogant, to say it a little bluntly, but I think most of them, they wake up and see that it's an open game, and you can tell in the United States, but also in Germany, that there's an excellence initiative, and it's a scandal now that Heidelberg in the last round this year didn't get the excellence funding, and they don't understand it because they think they have a right by heritage to have it, and so actually that's also what helps them to think outside the box, and that's what also this issue is about. First they said, we will never go there with any faculty, and by now they are waking up and they think they can join it. So it's always a question of go to where they are in terms of their thinking, and then slowly convincing them. It's nothing that we can say, do it like this, but you have to engage with the discourse. It's, as I said, it took 3 years to get really the university on board in Heidelberg with this integrated project.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you for the invitation.